senior government officials are sufficient, and whether in the future regular published financial disclosure forms or other additional transparency measures should be used. We will look closely at our system for providing transparency around lobbying, and, Mr. Speaker, it is clear that we should consider again the use of non-corporate communications channels within government. Revelations from the Epstein files have shown that it has been far too easy to forward sensitive information via unofficial channels. There is a lack of clarity about the use of non-corporate communication channels within government, which has raised concerns about the security of official information. As members on the benches opposite know from their former ministers who also forwarded information from the government via private email accounts to people when they shouldn't. The government recognises the consistent cause for a strategic review of these channels, the role they play in government, the legal framework in which they sit, and whether the current codes of conduct and guidance relating to them are effective. Mr. Speaker, this work will focus on the issues for government, but will complement a range of work being carried out in both this House and in the other place. The government is committed to the principle that second jobs for members of Parliament should be banned outside of very limited exceptions, such as maintaining professional qualification. The Committee on Standards is currently conducting an inquiry into second jobs, and we are working with the committee to deliver meaningful change as quickly as possible. The House is considering the legislation currently before Parliament to introduce a duty of candour, and the Prime Minister has been clear that we will bring forward legislation to enable the removal of peerages from those who brought the House of Lords into disrepute. And, Mr. Speaker, the government will ask the Lords Conduct Committee to expand its work reviewing the Code of Conduct in the other place to consider whether standards issues, including the rules relating to peers and lobbying, need to be reformed. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to provide the House with an update on the response to the humble address motion passed by the House last Wednesday. The government is committed to publishing all relevant documents in line with the motion agreed by the House and is working at pace to do so. As the House agreed on Wednesday, papers which the government believes should not be published on national security or international relations grounds will be referred to the Intelligence and Security Committee of Parliament. The Prime Minister wrote to the chair of the committee on Friday, acknowledging that it is important that documents are made available to Parliament as soon as possible. And as the Prime Minister has set out, the government is committed to being as transparent as soon as possible and in full compliance with the motion. The Prime Minister has asked the Cabinet Secretary to liaise with the Intelligence and Security Committee, and I will ensure that the House is kept updated on this work. Mr. Speaker, we have all been appalled at Jeffrey Epstein's disgusting crimes and Peter Mandelson's despicable behaviour. It is utterly contrary to what the Prime Minister stands for and the values at the heart of this government. We are resolute in our commitment to fighting men's violence against women and girls and supporting their victims. Delivering on this mission is a critical part of our response to the terrible misogyny at the heart of the Epstein scandal. We also recognise that Peter Mandelson's behaviour has posed difficult questions about our safeguards against corruption. I have set out today, Mr. Speaker, the steps the government is taking to ensure that the British public can have confidence in the integrity of public life, and I will continue to update the House, as I said last Monday and today, on these matters as our works develop. Mr. Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
Shut up a minute. They can't have points of order and just beginning the debate. So, that's the rules of the House. I'm not going to change it, especially for you. Neil O'Brien, Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for advance sight of his statement. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's authority is gone, and his government is starting to collapse. But the PM's decision to appoint Peter Mandelson raises massive questions about standards in public life, questions which the Minister's statement today just doesn't answer. Mr. Speaker, advisers advise, but ministers decide. And on that basis, can the Minister explain why it was right for Morgan McSweeney to resign, but not right for the Prime Minister to resign? Morgan McSweeney might have provided the advice, but it was the Prime Minister who made the decision to appoint the best friend of the world's most notorious paedophile to be His Majesty's ambassador in Washington. And the PM did this despite knowing that Mandelson had stayed in Epstein's house while he was in jail for child prostitution. The problem is not the structures or the processes. The information was there. The warnings were there. The problem is that the Prime Minister had all of that before him and yet chose to ignore it. He cannot keep blaming others. He cannot blame the process. He must start taking personal responsibility. For the record of this government on standards is truly extraordinary. First, the Prime Minister was embroiled in the freebies scandal. £107,000 in gifts given to him since 2019 and a personal donor being given a Downing Street pass. Then the Prime Minister was reprimanded by his own ethics advisor over the appointment of a non-disclosed Labour donor to be the football regulator. His Transport Secretary, an ex-cop, had to resign over misleading the police. His anti-corruption minister had to resign over corruption. His homelessness minister had to resign for making people homeless. And then his deputy prime minister, housing minister, had to resign over a £40,000 unpaid tax bill on her house. No wonder even the leader of the Scottish Labour Party now says that the PM must go. Mr Sarwar says, and I quote, "There have been too many mistakes and that he has no choice but to be honest about failure where I see it." He is right. Now let me turn to some specific questions. First, can the Minister confirm whether Peter Mandelson received a golden goodbye severance payment signed off by the government? Why has the government refused to answer this question since September? It's been reported that the golden goodbye was between £39,000 and £55,000, more than the average person earns in a year, Mr Speaker. This is grotesque. And what steps is the government taking to retrieve this incredible payment for resigning in disgrace? It sounded from the Minister like he was saying he couldn't do it. I have to remind the Minister, at the moment at least, they are actually the government. They can take action. Second, will the government agree to a full investigation into Peter Mandelson's behaviour while he was our ambassador? On 27th of February, Mandelson arranged for the Prime Minister to meet Palantir, a client of Global Counsel, his own company. It was not recorded in the Prime Minister's register of meetings. It only emerged later. Palantir were then directly awarded a £240 million contract by the government. I make no criticism of Palantir. My point is simply, why wasn't it recorded? How many more such lobbyist meetings with the PM were there? And what other inside information was being shared? Will he agree, yes or no, to a full inquiry into Mandelson's time as our ambassador? Third, let me ask about another New Labour veteran put forward for a public office despite his known association with a paedophile. Number 10 have said that they investigated Matthew Doyle's relationship with a convicted paedophile, Sean Morton. Number 10 gave Doyle, the PM's former Director of Communications, a peerage after purportedly examining this matter. But they have never clarified whether their relationship continued after Morton's conviction. If Doyle cut ties with Morton upon his conviction, why doesn't the government just say so? So I asked the Chief Secretary to clarify this, and will he agree to publish all the documents relating to that appointment? Fourth, the Chief Secretary told the House on the 2nd of February that a review of the decision to appoint Mandelson was underway. What form will it take? Will a statement be laid before Parliament? When? Will Mandelson be interviewed as part of that review? Will it include the potential involvement of hostile intelligence services? And finally, has the government substantively responded to the ISC's request for more resourcing so it can do its job properly in reviewing the papers that are about to be released? Mr. Speaker, no amount of process or fiddling about with procedures can compensate for a Prime Minister who lacked the judgment to act on information put before him. The Prime Minister was warned about Mandelson. He knew, but he decided it was a risk worth taking. And as the leader of the Scottish Labour Party pointed out today, it's not just the Mandelson affair. Time and time again, the Prime Minister gets it wrong, from the winter fuel payment to the family farm tax. And just like with the grooming gangs inquiry, the PM has once again put his own political interest ahead of the interests of victims. Mr. Speaker, at the start of his statement, the Minister says the PM's choices in this case go to the heart of who he is. And that is what we are worried about, Mr. Speaker. The PM's head of communications has resigned. The PM's chief of staff has resigned. The leader of the Scottish Labour Party says the Prime Minister should resign. It seems like more and more people, even in the Labour Party, are now coming to the same conclusion as the public. This country deserves better.
Minister Darren Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll remind the honourable gentleman that the public had their say at the last general election and elected a landslide Labour majority and put the party opposite into a historic defeat. And might I say that one of the reasons, in my view, Mr. Speaker, that the public booted that lot out of office was because of the repeated failings in standards and ethics, from the PPE contracts to dodgy friends to lying to Parliament to the sex misconduct scandals. And he says to me, why is it that ministers that have breached the code have resigned? Because we fixed the system. The reason we have an independent ethics advisor who can't be directed by the Prime Minister, as was the case under the previous party, is because it is independent. And when ministers have been found to break the code, they have gone, because that should be the consequence for doing so. The honourable member has asked me about what the Prime Minister knew at the time of Peter Mandelson's appointment. The Prime Minister has answered this question repeatedly, Mr. Speaker. The information that has come out since his appointment has made it clear that Peter lied to the Prime Minister about the state of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And had the Prime Minister had known then, at the point of appointment, what we all know now, with the privilege of hindsight, he would not have appointed him in the first place. He asked me a number of questions about the process, I think which flow from the humble address. As I've already informed the House, Mr. Speaker, the government is working with the leadership of the Intelligence and Security Committee to ensure that we can comply with the humble address and cooperate with transparency to release the documents in the way that we have said we will, in compliance with the Met Police investigation and other constraints which are currently being managed. And we will ensure that the Intelligence and Security Committee is given all the available support it needs to be able to service the House effectively in line with the humble address.
Is that it? Where shall we go? Dame Emily Thornbury.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to the right honourable gentleman for his speech and for telling us that relevant direct ministerial appointments, including politically appointed diplomatic roles, where they have access to highly classified material, will have to pass the requisite national security vetting process before such appointments are announced or confirmed. I know that it may sound a little surprising to members opposite because they probably didn't hear what he said because they were barracking the minister so much. But I mean, that's to be welcomed. However, the Foreign Affairs Committee has believed that Peter Mandelson should come in front of our committee before he was sent to Washington, and we were right. And we shouldn't have been prevented from seeing him. In the past, political appointees to ambassadorial roles have nearly always appeared before the committee, but only at the Foreign Office's discretion. We don't want discretion anymore. We would like it written into the rules that before someone is appointed to an ambassadorial role, or the chair of the British Council, or the director of the BBC World Service, we would like those political appointees to appear in public before the Foreign Affairs Committee and to answer our questions.
Can I thank the Chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee for her question? She raises important points about the process, particularly for the appointments of ambassadors and the delay between announcement, appointment, and also the host country then accepting their appointment to formally appoint them to their role. That's why we've made it clear today that the security vetting process will now have to be concluded before announcement and confirmation. She asks me about the role of pre-appointment hearings. I know that the Permanent Secretary of the Foreign Office has already informed her committee that the committee is entitled to invite ambassadors to appear before them to answer questions, and of course we continue to keep all other pre-appointment hearings under review.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Lisa Sparks.
Much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Chief Secretary for advance sight of his statement. We must remember that we're having this debate today because of the courage of the women and girls who spoke out against Jeffrey Epstein and those connected to him. Their bravery has forced us to confront uncomfortable truths around power, accountability and the standards we must demand from those in public life. There are many questions swirling around this place about judgment, rightly. And while you can't legislate out poor judgment, you can put in place a better system that leaves as little to chance as possible. And successive governments have failed to do that. From Partygate to ministerial code breaches that went unpunished, we have witnessed a systematic deterioration of standards and the current system is broken. The ministerial code lacks legal force. We need structural reform, and I welcome some of the measures that the Minister has mentioned in his remarks today, including the ability to boot out peers whose behaviour falls below the standard we should all expect. The ministerial code must be enshrined in law with genuine sanctions for breaches. The ministerial code must extend beyond its current parameters to include senior public servants like ambassadors And we agree that vetting standards must also be made tougher, and they should include trade envoys, like Andrew Mountbatten, Windsor. We must also ban those who've served in any capacity for a current foreign administration from donating to political parties, think tanks or campaign organisations. And we must end government by WhatsApp. All ministerial instant messaging conversations involving government business must be placed on the departmental record. These should be published quarterly alongside emails, letters and phone calls to ensure greater transparency. We should also protect whistleblowers through a new Office of the Whistleblower with legal protections and criminal sanctions on ministers who fail to report wrongdoing. Just this morning, Madam Deputy Speaker, I met the lively and engaged Year 12 students from Hazel Grove High School. When the next election rolls around, they can all vote. They deserve better than the broken system, and we should all be working hard to restore the public's trust in politics.
Chief Secretary.
I thank the Honourable Lady for her statement and remarks. I think we all agree that we don't just need effective rules, but effective enforcement for people who break those rules. And these issues have highlighted the fact that there is more work to do. And I look forward, as does the government, in working on a cross-party basis to make sure, as she said, that we bring justice for victims who are affected by the abuse of power.
Afsana Begum.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In December 2025, Palantir won a 3-year contract worth £240 million from the government. This contract, which is 3 times larger than any that Palantir has previously won, was awarded without tender. Will the Minister ensure that there is full transparency of how this decision was made and who was involved? And does he agree with me more widely that resignations under the last government meant that true accountability could be evaded and obscured, and that all our constituents wanted from us and this government was the change that we promised to deliver?
In the first part of my honourable friend's question, I can assure her that all procurement rules have been followed, but if there is any suggestion of wrongdoing, we have powers under the Procurement Act to take action if required. On the second part of her question, I agree with her that the public were calling for change at the last election, partly because of the repeated scandal issues that happened under the last administration, and that's why, as I've set out today, we've already taken action to make the Ethics Advisor independent, institute the Ethics and Integrity Commission, and as I've set out in my statement today, we will go further.
Select Committee Chair Simon Hoare.
Madam Deputy Speaker, could I ask the Chief Secretary the following points? He said in answer to an earlier question the documentation would be released in compliance with the Metropolitan Police. Can he ensure that his department, number 10, and the Met understand what parliamentary privilege means and assert it on behalf of this House? Secondly, he's mentioned the bill which would remove Mandelson's titles in preparation. Now, that's a short bill. Could he tell us when he expects to see it introduced in this place and guarantee a one-day process for all stages of the bill? And his statement today is entitled Standards in Public Life. Knowing that Mandelson was a friend of Epstein, forget the extent, and all of Mandelson's baggage, could the Chief Secretary finally explain to the House why Mandelson was ever on the short list of people being considered to be appointed to probably our most important ambassadorial role?
Secretary.
Can I thank the Chair of the Select Committee for his questions? On his first question around privilege, I don't for one second question the supremacy of Parliament or the basis of parliamentary privilege. All I meant to say was that the government is in discussions with the Met Police, who have launched a criminal investigation, and that it's important that we work with them to ensure that information is released that doesn't then affect their criminal investigations. The Cabinet Secretary and others are in discussions with the Met Police about that, and we hope to be able to say more soon. On his question on the bill, as I informed the House last week, the government's preference is to bring forward legislation that could be applied to any peer who is subject to breaching the rules and bringing the other place into disrepute. We have begun the work at looking at the scope and ability for that bill to be brought forward to the House. I've been informed that that has not been, that a bill of that nature has not been brought before Parliament since 1425, and that there are the 1970 bill, Madam Deputy Speaker, if I may have a few moments, was about a collective group of peers who had been, I think, collaborating with the Nazis around the Second World War. This issue is different. This is about standards that should apply to all peers in the House of Lords, and you should have appropriate mechanisms for that to be instigated. But we are working on that. We're liaising with House authorities to ensure that we can do that right, and we'll bring it forward very, very shortly. On his final question about the appointment of Peter Mandelson, as the Prime Minister has said repeatedly, if he had known at the point of his appointment what we know now, he would not have appointed him in the first place.
Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Chief Secretary for his statement. And I wonder if he could tell the House how the Prime Minister is considering strengthening the role of the Ethics and Integrity Commission, given his commitment to improving standards in public life.
Chief Secretary.
I thank my honourable friend for her question. The Ethics and Integrity Commission has been set up only very recently by this government to play an important role in relation to standards in public life. We want to work with the Ethics and Integrity Commission together to ensure that we set it up for success in delivering on the issues and reforms that I've mentioned to the House today, and that's the basis on which we will be collaborating with them.
Chair of the Standards Committee, Alberto Costa.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, I never make comment about any conduct or standards issues that may impact on individual MPs, precisely because of my adjudicatory role in the Committee on Standards, and I don't propose to refer to the Prime Minister in respect of the potential that if not all documents are disclosed to the House, it might be a breach of privilege. But I do want to just say gently to the Minister this, that when he constantly refers to the past and to my party in government's role with breaches of the standards issues, from this moment on, will he accept that given the litany of issues that have befallen the Labour government, as outlined by my honourable friend at the dispatch box, that it would really behove him if he stopped doing that and just ensured that going forward the Labour government acts with the same standards of conduct that it demanded of my party in government? And might he request the Prime Minister, given the statements that he's made here today, to attend a meeting with the Committee on Standards to outline exactly how, moving forward, the Prime Minister will uphold the highest of standards?
Chief Secretary.
On the first part of his question, Madam Deputy Speaker, I agree that we need to ensure that we have a standard system both in this place and the other place that meets the challenges we're talking about today. That is not a party political issue. I merely make reference to the performance of the last government, given the chuntering that we've had from the benches opposite when I was talking about the reforms we're bringing forward to ensure justice for victims and appropriate powers to tackle corruption in the future. On the second part of his question, I'm sure that if he writes to the Prime Minister's office will engage with him and his committee on his invitation.
I call Polly Billington, followed by Steve Darling. Polly Billington.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think it's worth reminding my honourable friend that one of the things that people keep going back to is that the decision was made that this appointment was worth the risk. And what we finally found out was that some people decided that the rules didn't apply to them. Considering how important tackling violence against women and girls is to this government and to this Prime Minister, could the honourable gentleman agree to meet with women backbenchers in particular to discuss the possibility of exploring further how we tackle misogyny in public life?
Secretary.
I would be very happy to meet with my honourable friend and colleagues and to do anything I can in pursuit of that outcome.
Steve Darling.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is jaw-dropping how many rich and powerful people were within Epstein's orbit and how many of them believed that they were untouchable. It's important that we have a culture that is supportive and trusting around whistleblowers. Does the Minister agree with me that we need to have an office for whistleblowers as the backbone for such a positive culture?
Chief Secretary.
I agree with the honourable member that we need to ensure those processes are available in all circumstances. My understanding is the legislation was updated in recent years, but I'm happy to consider any inputs from the honourable member and other members in the House if they wish to send them to me.
Joanna Baxter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for his statement, and would he be able to confirm the actions the government has taken to ensure that direct ministerial appointments, including political appointments, must pass the appropriate security vetting processes prior to those appointments being announced or confirmed?
Chief Secretary.
I can confirm from my honourable friend that the rules have been updated to ensure that national security vetting must receive full clearance before any direct ministerial appointments are confirmed publicly or then confirmed for appointments at later stages. As I said to our honourable friend, the Chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee recently, for ambassadors in particular, the process can often be quite stretched out over a number of days from announcement to being confirmed by host country and then fully being in post. But we will update the rules to make sure that what happened in these circumstances with Peter Mandelson can't happen again.
Sir Ian Duncan-Smith.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't doubt the right honourable gentleman's desire to put things right. What I slightly doubt today is that right now, today, when everything is about the Prime Minister's judgment, that this looks a lot like smoke to me. This is right, but not right now. And the point I simply say to him is that the point about Mandelson is that all of this stuff was actually known in conversation and discussion. He was sacked twice for impropriety in government office. He actually ended up in Deripaska's yacht when the EU was discussing taxation on aluminium, improper again, and all this stuff leads to the final question of why him. Then, of course, the vetting was not good enough, but it could have been had they bothered to check everything. And I simply say to the honourable gentleman, there is a big question to be asked here, as my honourable gent said. Surely this is ultimately about the Prime Minister's judgment in overruling anything that he found and deciding for his own purposes that this man should have been appointed to ambassador.
Secretary.
The right honourable gentleman will know that the Prime Minister apologised last Thursday for having appointed Peter Mandelson to the post. As he said repeatedly, had he seen the information that we are now all able to see from the release of documents from the US Department for Justice, which showed the level of corruption, but also the deep and extensive relationship that existed between Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein, on which Peter Mandelson lied to the Prime Minister about at the point of his appointment, he would never have appointed him in the first place.
Alex McIntyre.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank my right honourable friend for his statement. My biggest concern, the biggest concern of my constituents, is that the impact of behaviour like Peter Mandelson's undermines trust in our politics and in our democracy, because quite frankly, all parties in this House have had scandals related to someone in their party. It gives us all a bad name. So can I ask, from the bottom of my heart, can this government get a grip of it and end the sleaze and scandal culture that has engulfed all of our politics, all of our parties, so that I can go back to my constituents and say, no, we're not all the same?
I thank my honourable friend for his question. As I said in my statement, the vast majority of members of this House, but also civil servants and other political appointments in the other place, come into politics to serve the public, not to serve themselves. But what the Peter Mandelson issue has shown is that for all of the rules that we have in place that work for the majority of people doing the right thing, there have still been loopholes for people who want to do the wrong thing, and those are the loopholes that we're now going to close.
Stephen Gethins.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I thank the Minister for his statement today? It was clearly preferable being here than in the reception that the Prime Minister is hosting for Scottish Labour MPs and MSPs later on. I've lost count of the amount of time that I've spent here dealing with one way or another Westminster chaos. And it often relates to members of the House of Lords who are there for life, be they Labour, Liberal or Conservative. This statement's tinkering. When will they commit to what they've committed to for 115 years and dealing with the obscenity that is the House of Lords?
The honourable member will know that the government's committed to working with peers in the other place to modernise the House of Lords, and that we agree that that needs to happen. That's why we're in the process of removing hereditary peers and why we're working with the authorities in the other place to make sure that we deal with the issues we're talking about today.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Chief Secretary for his statement and his focus on the victims of these appalling crimes. Could the Chief Secretary explain what steps this government has taken to ensure victim survivors of these vile crimes are heard by those in power?
Chief Secretary.
I thank my honourable friend, and he's right to bring us back to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein and all women and girls who have been subjected to these atrocious crimes across the country, because evidently their voices continue to not be heard and these crimes continue to perpetuate. That's why the government's committed to halving violence against women and girls, and why it's introduced the measures to ensure standards of public life are enforced in this place and in the other place too.
Sir John Whittingdale.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I tell the Chief Secretary, in relation to his previous answer, the Foreign Affairs Committee repeatedly asked for Lord Mandelson to appear. He refused to come. But what the Foreign Affairs Committee did hear was from the Permanent Under-Secretary that Lord Mandelson would be entitled to a payoff in relation to the terms of his contract. So can the Chief Secretary say how much he received and whether or not he will be asked to repay it?
The Foreign Office is currently reviewing the terms of the contract that led to the suggestion of severance payments when Peter Mandelson was sacked and is due to update the House in due course.
Sam Rushworth.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can I thank the Chief Secretary for his statement? It is refreshing to see a government that's committed to making those in positions of trust accountable. They're clearly very angry today. And maybe it's because it's in marked contrast to a record of people who voted to cover up for one of their friends. But may I say, for ordinary people in Bishop Auckland, the crimes of Epstein are truly shocking and disgusting, and they're shocked to see this global web of power and people acting with such complete impunity. So is the government, in addition to looking at improved vetting, looking at how we have improved surveillance and vetting of those who are in a position of trust to make sure that these sorts of things cannot happen by those who are entrusted?
Chief Secretary.
I thank my honourable friend for his question. As he will have heard in my statement today, there are a number of avenues that the government is pursuing, including the potential for more routine annual disclosure of financial and commercial interests that we hope will shed more light on some of these issues where individuals are getting away with breaking the rules.
Gavin Robinson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chief Secretary will know that there are too many members on both sides of this House that enjoy situations like this, and it belies the seriousness of the situation. Does he recognise that an integrity and ethics advisor would not be able to solve the appointment of somebody removed from government twice if the Prime Minister wishes to appoint them? Exactly the point. Would not be able to assist a former director of the Public Prosecution Service whose professionalism should have been to discern the truth in accepting lies, or to inject honour in a situation where a Prime Minister accepts the advice of an individual and then accepts his resignation, but receive the advice?
Chief Secretary.
I thank the honourable member for his question, and he's right that the public do not expect party political bickering on these issues, but problems to be solved and justice to be sought for those who deserve it. On the question of the advice the Prime Minister received, as I've said a number of times, Peter Mandelson lied to the Prime Minister. Questions were asked, and Peter Mandelson lied in his answers. I'm sure that will become clear as part of the disclosure of documents in compliance with the humble address in the coming weeks.
Charters.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank my right honourable friend for all he's doing to overhaul standards in public life after the absolute bin fire that the party opposite left. But can I ask him to comment on this? Because Peter Mandelson is reportedly in receipt of a severance payment, and I was a former regulator, and clawback's an important tool that can come in. So does my right honourable friend agree that, if possible, Peter Mandelson should be forced to pay every single penny back to the British people?
Chief Secretary.
I do agree with my honourable friend, and as I say, the Foreign Office will be coming forward with more information in due course.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Intelligence and Security Committee wrote to the Prime Minister last Thursday. The letter was published and it included the following. The committee would be grateful to now be told the date on which we will receive the papers such that we are able to plan the resourcing requirements. I don't doubt what the Minister said about the government being committed to being as transparent as possible, but in his statement the Minister repeated the phrase as soon as possible. Can the Minister go beyond ASAP so that the Intelligence and Security Committee can plan the resourcing before receiving the papers?
I can confirm the government will be working with the Intelligence and Security Committee. There are meetings, I think, happening today and tomorrow morning on that basis. The government is just liaising with the Metropolitan Police about the criminal investigation. And once that has been clarified, we'll be able to move forward with disclosures to the House.
Burren Moon.
Whereas, Madam Deputy Speaker, could the Chief Secretary elaborate to the House how the government will work with the Committee on Standards on proposals to ban second jobs for members of Parliament to deliver meaningful change?
My honourable friend will know that it was a clear manifesto commitment of our party to ban second jobs for members of Parliament, except in limited circumstances, for example, where you have to maintain a professional qualification by being a doctor or a lawyer. The committee in the House is considering those issues, and I know that they've been working on them in quite some detail. The government is working with the committee to try to move that on as quickly as possible, and I know the committee wishes to do the same.
Sir Julian Lewis.
I think it's notable, Madam Deputy Speaker, that despite the government's huge majority, I think they've run out of people to stand up and defend their position. Now, the Minister is, and I'm not being patronising, the Minister is a very intelligent man. Therefore, I ask of him that he does not insult the intelligence of the rest of us when he talks about the Prime Minister having believed Mandelson's lies after he asked him questions. We now know from the forensic questioning by the Leader of the Opposition that the Prime Minister knew that the relationship between Mandelson and Epstein carried on, ongoing was the word, after his being jailed for paedophilia and prostitution-related offences. He apparently chose to ask for more questions after that and was lied to. What more did he need to know before knowing that this man should never be allowed within miles of the American post as our ambassador?
Chief Secretary.
My honourable friend will, in due course, see papers disclosed in compliance with the humble address, which will be very clear in showing the questions that were asked to Peter Mandelson and the lies that Peter Mandelson responded with in answering the Prime Minister's questions.
Anne Davies.
Madam Secretary, and I thank the Chief Secretary for the statement. We in Wales know how this story ends. The former Welsh First Minister Vaughan Gething was forced to resign following a serious error of judgment, and the Prime Minister had expressed full confidence in him. The Prime Minister then went on to appoint Peter Mandelson, despite his association with a convicted paedophile being a matter of public record. So what lessons, if any, does the Chief Secretary draw from this pattern of poor judgment at the very top of government?
Chief Secretary.
As I've repeated to the House, Madam Deputy Speaker, there needs to be rules that apply in all circumstances to all people in respect of the House of Lords, this House of Commons, and in appointment to these roles, and clear consequences for people who lie or breach those rules. And those are the reforms that the government are bringing forward.
Sir Bernard Jenkins.
Madam Deputy Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister's adviser, Morgan McSweeney, resigned because he had advised the Prime Minister to make this appointment. What advice did the National Security Advisor, Jonathan Powell, give to the Prime Minister? And if he did give the same advice, shouldn't he resign as well?
Chief Secretary.
The honourable member will know that it would not be appropriate for me to speak on behalf of civil servants and special advisers from the dispatch box. The statements released by Morgan McSweeney and Keir Starmer yesterday answer his questions in relation to Morgan McSweeney's decision to resign from post.
Sian Berry.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. A government enthralled to men and corporations drunk on power is the rot at the centre of Mandelson's scandal. When people operate in the shadows, they think they can act with impunity. So of all the 7 Nolan principles, openness can help build back the most trust. So does the Chief Secretary agree that we must drive out corporate influence and money, and as a start, would he cap political donations and ask all MPs and peers to follow my example in releasing logs of all lobbying meetings so the people can know we work for them?
Chief Secretary.
I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. On a number of those measures, as I said in my statement, we are looking at the current procedures and whether they can be updated in the future to provide more transparency. But she is right that individual rules alone, whilst can be improved, will not be sufficient for tackling the cultural issues that lead to some of these challenges. And it's upon all of us on a cross-party basis and any other people in power to call out and make it clear that that's not acceptable in public life.
Sir Alex Shelbrooke.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Further to the point that my right honourable friend for Chingford and Woodford Green made, this does look like smoke today. It really does. I mean, this horse has bolted so far, it's at Wetherby Racecourse. And I have to say to the honourable gentleman that he really is not giving the answers that we need to hear. So let me ask the right honourable gentleman. He said that what goes to the heart of the Prime Minister is what he's trying to do. So why did the Prime Minister believe that somebody who took loans which in today's money would be worth over £1 million was found to be flogging passports? Why did the Prime Minister ever think that that person should be rewarded?
Chief Secretary.
On the first part of the honourable gentleman's question, I would just remind him that the reforms that this government has made in the past 18 years and those which we're talking about today will be the most wide-ranging reforms to standards in public life that we've seen for a very, very long time indeed. I wouldn't call that smoke and mirrors, I'd call that progress. On the second part of his question, as I've said repeatedly to the House, if the Prime Minister had known the depth and extent of the relationship between Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein, then he wouldn't have been appointed in the first place. And it's easy for members on the opposite benches with the benefits of hindsight and now with access to the documents that were not available to the Prime Minister at the time of appointment to say that it should have been done otherwise.
Alison Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This matter is not about process, it is about the judgment of the Prime Minister. And we really can't legislate out poor judgment that we've seen on evidence today. So maybe the Minister has considered our calls to create an Office of the Whistleblower, but would he also agree that we can ensure that there are proper criminal sanctions for those ministers who fail to whistleblow to mitigate the frailties and human error we see here?
I'd point the Honourable Lady to the duty of candour provisions that we're bringing forward in the Public Accountability Bill, which include criminal sanctions for those who breach those rules. And as I've said to her honourable friends on the Liberal Democrat benches, I'm very happy to consider wider recommendations for whistleblowers as she sets out.
Esther McMahon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Given the importance of standards in public life, why is it that the advisor who suggested Peter Mandelson as the ambassador to the US has had to resign, but the person who actually appointed Peter Mandelson, that is the Prime Minister, is still in post?
Chief Secretary.
As the Prime Minister said last Thursday, he has apologised for having appointed Peter Mandelson, and had the information that is now available had been available at the time of his appointment, he wouldn't have appointed him in the first place.
Ayub Khan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We all know that the Prime Minister is a lawyer, and one of the traits of a lawyer is to understand and test the veracity of information that is being provided. We know that the Prime Minister has said from that dispatch box that he took a risk and that he had known that Mandelson kept his relationship with Epstein. The real question is that I suspect the risk was that the public wouldn't find out. The public do now know. Is it not time for the Prime Minister to simply go?
Secretary.
No.
Katie Lamb.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is insulting. The first time, though it was not to be the last time, that Peter Mandelson resigned in disgrace from a Labour government, then Tony Blair's cabinet, I was 7 years old. Is the Minister seriously telling us that our Prime Minister needs tweaks to process to know not to hire somebody who has been a nationally notorious crook for over 25 years?
Secretary.
As the Honourable Lady will have heard, if the Prime Minister had access to the information we now have about the depth and extent of the relationship between Jeffrey Epstein and Peter Mandelson, he would have not been appointed in the first place.
Tessa Munns.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and if I may, I'll direct the House to my register of members' interests in relation to whistleblowing. I'm very hopeful that Chief Secretary knows that I was promised a meeting with him about the subject of whistleblowers during the passage of the Public Office Accountability Bill. I look forward to meeting him. I wonder if he is aware, I hope he is, that actually the current legislation dealing with whistleblowers directs them into the Employment Tribunal, of which there are 47,000 cases awaiting to be heard. We have to do something about whistleblowing and making sure the protections are in place. I'm looking forward to meeting him with a number of my colleagues so that we can discuss this in detail in full.
As I've said to the Honourable Lady's colleagues on the Liberal Democrat benches, I'm very happy to receive further representations on reform of the law as it relates to whistleblowers, and if we need to go further, we'll be happy to consider such.
Dr. Andrew Mercer.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The Minister has managed to throw out more chaff than a B-52. Can I ask him, in his remarks about security vetting, whether he means developed vetting of the sort that is applied to very senior officials before they are appointed to extremely sensitive positions, including military individuals, or whether he has something else in mind? Will he say whether that will be repeated periodically, as is the case for officials? And will it be applied both to political appointees and also ministerial appointments, as say appointments as ministers, where those positions are particularly sensitive?
Secretary.
I think the honourable member knows, Madam Deputy Speaker, that there's different processes in relation to the different types of roles that we might have and others in government, from due diligence through to develop national security vetting, as he sets out. The important point is that the right process is applied to the right person at the right time, and that is what we're reviewing right now.
Pete Wishart.
Deputy Speaker, the only statement that my constituents want today is a resignation statement. The only reform they want is the reform that takes this Prime Minister out of 10 Downing Street. It doesn't matter how many reviews, inquiries or fireguards they put in the way. He has lost the confidence and trust of the British people. What we need is a government that will end this chaos. They promised to end this chaos when they came to power. Instead, it is through the stratosphere. He knows, everybody in this House knows, everybody in this country knows, he is toast. Why don't they just get on with it and get rid of him?
Secretary.
The honourable gentleman seems to be wishing for more chaos in our country. The public voted to end that at the last general election, and that's why this government's getting on for delivering change for people across the country.
Wendy Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Today's statement is actually little more than a smoke screen, an attempt to detract away from the key issue, which is about Peter Mandelson and our Prime Minister. There are more questions being asked and still no answers. I'd like to take the Minister very briefly back to that central point about a golden goodbye for Peter Mandelson. How much?
Secretary.
I refer the right honourable lady to my previous answer.
Sammy Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Of course, we do need to have a Commissioner who has got the powers and abilities to expose where there's been corruption and to deal with it. But this statement today is not required, because we already know that a bad judgment has been made by the Prime Minister, and really what the public want to know is how is he going to be held to account for things which he already knew and ignored. But can the Minister give us an assurance that in looking at extra powers for commissioners will not go as far as what has happened in Northern Ireland, where the discredited former Standards Commissioner has used her powers to silence members of the Assembly for too vigorously questioning ministers or not showing enough empathy when they make public statements about security situations in their own constituency, and especially since some of the members sitting behind me, when their heckling fails, now threaten members by reporting to the Standards Commissioner to try and silence them that way.
Chief Secretary.
I think it's important, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we take good practice wherever it exists and learn the lessons where reforms have not worked, whether in our Parliament or in other devolved governments across the United Kingdom. And the honourable gentleman is encouraged to write to me with his examples in more detail to ensure that we avoid that in the future. I can assure him that the government has no intention to want to try to limit the voices of people in this House or indeed anywhere else.
Gregory Stafford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Going back to the process the Prime Minister followed, he received information from the vetting and security services that Peter Mandelson might have had an ongoing relationship. He then questioned Peter Mandelson about that. Did he then test those answers that Peter Mandelson gave with that security and vetting service? Because if he did not, it can only mean one of two things. Either he has a dereliction of duty or he's a credulous fool. Either way, he should resign, shouldn't he?
Yeah. Chief Secretary.
No.
Jim Allister.
Thank you. Can I take the House back to where this debate started? It began with the shadow spokesman reminding us that advisers advise and ministers decide. And in the back of that, I want to give the Minister the opportunity, I think for the fourth time in this debate, to answer the fairly fundamental question that I'd like to know the answer to and my constituents would like to know the answer to. If it is right for an advisor to resign? Why not the far more culpable decision maker?
Chief Secretary.
As the Prime Minister has made clear, he apologised for appointing Peter Mandelson to the position of ambassador, and had the information which is now available been available at the point of his appointment, he would never have appointed Peter Mandelson in the first place.
Dr. Luke Evans.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I thank the Minister for his statement about the new rules and legislation that he's bringing forward. I've missed something, though. Could he point to the one that he's bringing forward that would stop a Prime Minister from appointing a twice-sacked best friend of the world's greatest paedophile?
Chief Secretary.
I refer him to the detail of my statement.
Rupert Law.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Many of us, including myself, spoke in this House against the ill-judged appointment of Peter Mandelson, which flew in the face of logic, given his poor relationship with the US and his history of misfeasance in public office. Will the Minister undertake to obtain all redacted evidence from the US pertaining to all UK persons in positions of influence referred to in the Epstein documents and expose them to the public? This is the only way to clear up this global scandal for the UK electorate.
Chief Secretary.
Where the government has jurisdiction over documents and in compliance with the humble address, we will publish them, as I've said to the House earlier today.
Ben Obsojecti.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister keeps making reference to if we had known then what we know now with regards to Peter Mandelson's appointment. But the key fact is that we already knew of Peter Mandelson's ongoing relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, as the Prime Minister spoke about at PMQs last week, just as the government knew about Matthew Dawes' relationship with Sean Morton and still gave him a peerage after the internal investigation. But coming back to the resignation statement of the Chief of Staff yesterday, he stated that whilst I did not oversee the due diligence or vetting procedure, so could the Minister explain who did oversee the due diligence and vetting procedure?
Chief Secretary.
These processes are administered by the Proprietary and Ethics team in the Cabinet Office, by the Foreign Office and all of the normal appropriate authorities.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And Chief Secretary is an honourable man, and he's answering incredibly difficult questions, and we have to recognise that. The Chief Secretary will know that I seek to find solutions rather than prioritising point scoring. I say that very respectfully in this House. In this instance, it's clear that the public want a solution to the seeming litany of trust-breaking decisions taken by successive governments. And whilst we cannot please all people, the issue of a basic standard for public servants is non-negotiable. And this breakdown, I believe, has highlighted the need for accountability at the highest level. So does the Chief Secretary believe that this can be achieved without a complete overhaul of the appointment system?
I agree with the Honourable Member that there's evidently a number of changes that need to be brought forward, and as he suggests in his question, I think that should be done on a cross-party basis in the interest of how we serve the public.
Iqbal Mahmood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The confidence in the Prime Minister is at an all-time low, and many of the reasons for that have already been discussed. However, one particular issue, the Prime Minister visited Palantir's head offices in Washington, DC in February 2025. Will the Chief Secretary confirm if Peter Mandelson advised the PM to visit Palantir, what the purpose of the visit was? Will the government publish details and minutes of the discussions that took place at this meeting? And will the government review all existing contracts with Palantir and suspend any further engagement with them until the investigations are completed?
The Prime Minister engages with a whole host of businesses, whether in the United Kingdom or abroad. In relation to his question suggesting particular wrongdoing, as I said to my honourable friend earlier, we have powers under the Procurement Act on these issues if we must, and if evidence comes to light, then we reserve the right to do so.
Dr. Kieran Mullen.
The problem with the list that the Minister read out is not one of those measures will protect us from the Prime Minister's poor judgment, unfortunately. And before asking my question, I will just point out to him, as the Minister sat next to him knows, and he mentioned himself, the government is currently putting through a House the Duty of Candour Bill, which will require ministers legally to answer questions frankly and with information that they have, which people could usefully think that they should know. So asking for a third time, how much is the Peter Mandelson due to take as part of his payoff?
Chief Secretary.
As I said, the Foreign Office will update the House in due course.
Geopolitics.
Shortcut Adam.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Minister for his statement and definitely agree that Epstein's crimes were disgusting and Mandelson's behaviour was despicable. But I'd like to remind the Minister that under the last government, the now Prime Minister said this: "A fish rots from the head down, and the real change had to be led and modelled from the top." Yet here we are, the issue is back. Despite the colour of the rosette changing, the Prime Minister's closest circle must now take the fall for his poor decision-making and appointing a man who is at best friends with a paedophile. Given that there is now a criminal investigation into his closest advisers, shouldn't he do the honourable thing and take his own advice?
Chief Secretary.
The Prime Minister, as he said today, is getting on with the job of delivering change for this country that the electorate voted for 18 months ago, rewarding my party with a huge majority in this House. These issues are important and we will fix them, not least keeping the victims of sexual abuse and abuse of power at the centre of those thoughts. And I know that members across the House will want to work with us to ensure that that is done.
And that concludes the statement. And we now move on to motion number 1 on business of the House today. Minister to move.
Back to move.